Welcome to Beyond the Bubble. We're back from our winter break and we're glad to be here with a new name, the same old career services webinar series, though, getting underway tonight. And with us, we have a special panel. We have Bert Hasler, who is the program associate at WIP in Washington, D.C., and Kristiana Bolzman, who's the development manager at the Independent Institute based out of Oakland, California. So thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and so tonight, what we hope to talk about is how to use the Hillsdale brand to your advantage. So we're gonna get to that, but just shortly, we thought it would make sense to first start by asking you both about your time at Hillsdale and how you got to your position, since that is interesting for all the students who are still here at campus to learn about all the successful alums out there. So we'll start with you, Kristiana. So tell us a little bit about how you became the development manager at the Independent Institute, when you graduated, some of the things you did at Hillsdale. Give us the quick synopsis of your life so far. Get into the job of development as a development manager.
Sure. Well, the quick synopsis, I worked at the Mackinac Center for Public Policy in Michigan in high school. That's what got me interested in public policy and into Hillsdale as well. At Hillsdale, I like to say I minored in mock trial. I think I spent enough hours on it. Also specialized in journalism, majored in politics, and spent some time with Bert there in Washington, D.C. Hillsdale, the name and also the experience helped get me into the Heritage Foundation, Fox News. Spent a little bit of time on the Hill with the Republican Study Committee. And I think all of that experience and my fundraising background at Mackinac then launched me into the Independent Institute. I graduated in 2017, last spring, started right up here at Independent, and was promoted to manager in December. So that's where I'm at.
Great. And what is your, what is the job as development manager day to day? What does that involve?
Sure. Well, fundamentally, I guess we're fundraisers. So there's a lot of different possible roles for a manager. My role is specifically working with grants. So I do proposal writing, reporting, letters of intent, all basically selling the free market ideas that the Independent Institute is promoting to foundations and individuals who are interested in giving us the money to continue those programs.
Great. And then Bert, how about yourself? So tell us, how did you end up as the program associate at WIP?
Yeah, so I graduated from Hillsdale in 2015. At Hillsdale, I was a finance major. So really enjoyed all kind of the core curriculum with Hillsdale, but pursued my degree in business.
I don't need the internet, so you guys do.
Andy, can you hear us now?
Yeah, made it in.
Great. So for those of you just joining us, you're listening to or watching Beyond the Bubble here, and Andy Losik will also be, it's Andy Losik, excuse me, will also be joining us for this interview, and we'll get to him in just a second here. But Bert, continue telling us about how you got into the job as program associate.
Right. So was studying finance at Hillsdale, was really involved with kind of different organizations at Hillsdale, was a member of Sigma Chi fraternity, also did Students Against Cancer, student mentoring, really enjoyed kind of the community aspect that Hillsdale had to offer. And so by my junior year, I realized that I still wanted to do kind of a capstone project or a program with Hillsdale, and WIP was just kind of the perfect fit. So I came out to DC my senior year, my second semester, my senior year, really looking to just get some internship experience and get plugged into the DC network. I interned for a lobbying firm for my semester on WIP, and then also got to take a history class, an English class, and a politics class, which was just so awesome. After being stuck in finance classes for 2 years doing Excel work, it was fun to get back into kind of the liberal arts and the core curriculum. Graduated from Hillsdale and knew that I wanted to stay in DC. I loved the political aspect of DC, but didn't know if I wanted to kind of dive right in to the Capitol Hill life or anything like that. So I took a job as a nonprofit accountant for the Mercatus Center and the Institute for Humane Studies, which are two great nonprofits out in the Arlington area. got to do finance work, but then also got to be in touch with student programs, the free market policies that interested me. And so did that for a year. And that's when the Kirby Center called me back and asked if I'd be interested in coming back to run the WIP program that I did my senior year. And just, with how such a positive experience it was as a student, it was hard to say no. And I also got to dive back into kind of the thing that I loved the most about Hillsdale, which was the community aspect. So getting to work with young professionals who are also eager to start their careers out in DC.
Great.
Looking to build out some things that, the kind of things that we want to be at Kirby, and I'll get into that later, but
yeah,
a lot of excitement going on here. So that's how I kind of ended up out in here.
Great. And yeah, I do have more questions about WIP and all that for our viewers. But before we get there, Andy, so we've been going around so far, kind of just introducing ourselves. I understand you're an elementary school STEM teacher, so why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what you do and how you got there after your time at Hillsdale?
Well, sure. I feel like the old guy on this panel. I graduated from Hillsdale in 1994, but great to hear there's another Sigma Chi, at least one on the panel here. And so, well, what's STEM? STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. And so basically, I'm the fun teacher at school. Kids come to see me for an hour each week, and we go through. We do all kinds of things from learning to code to today we're building zipline vehicles out of Legos to travel down fish line, and they had to see how big of a capacity of marbles they could engineer to bring down the zip line. And so ultimately what we're trying to do is just teach some of a lot of science basics, a lot of the design process, a lot of how to work together. And we're really working on little kids having good executive function, meaning that they're able to handle themselves when the teacher takes the clamps off. It'd be real easy to lock them down with lots of paper and pencil and stuff, but they have to be able to function, as a teammate. All these things that our high-end industry in the Holland area is telling us they want kids to graduate with as senior, from college, and we're trying to instill that as much as possible. So as far as how did I get here from Hillsdale? Well, I finished student teaching in December, and I went out to Arizona and started as a fourth grade teacher there. And I was really lucky to have a great mentor teacher who dragged me around to very primitive educational technology conferences and workshops in 1995 as it was just getting going. And I really found a niche and a passion in that. And then met my wife in Arizona, and we both wanted to get back to Michigan. And so when we came back here, I just landed as a sixth grade teacher in Hamilton. But after 2 years of doing that, the district wanted to create some type of elementary technology course or class. And I had the fortunate privilege of being able to really develop that with another co-teacher. And so we've seen technology at the elementary level, educational technology really evolve from, like I said, back when I started in 1995, all the way up to where we are now. And then we got to the point a couple of years ago where we said, you know what, there needs to be more than just technology. We need these kids to understand the design process. And really the cool thing about my job, I tell people all the time, is it wasn't even invented when I was taking the ed psych classes and student teaching at the academy before they built the academy, when the academy was a bunch of portable trailers down behind where the suites is now. But it's at Hillsdale Liberal Arts, just being able to think that let us invent all this stuff. And that
kind of helps us transition into the next segment of this episode tonight, which is, how do you think your time at Hillsdale, in the Hillsdale brand, so to speak, what type of qualities came out of that, Andy, that helped you, especially with what you were talking about, kind of even create a whole job of itself in the field that you found yourself in?
Yeah, definitely. If you look at Hillsdale, it's the antithesis what most people would think of being high tech. But it really hit me several years after I left Hillsdale, when Steve Jobs was introducing iPad 2. And he said, and he's got this slide behind him of the liberal arts and technology being crossroads. And and he talked about technology can't be in itself. You've got to have great content. You've got to have the liberal arts that really makes the technology sing. And for me, it's all the higher order thinking that, people like Dan Sundahl in those English classes just hammered us with, like, why do you think this is true? How is this? And, learning to analyze things, learning to be a critical thinker. And that's basically what I've been able to do is as these new technologies or opportunities come along, I'm able to take them apart bit by bit and then put it back together in a way that our elementary kids can benefit from it, and in a way that, it makes sense, and to understand that. And so, I tell people all the time, there's so much value in the liberal arts, just knowing how to think, because, you can figure out anything. And now as fast as our world changes, having that ability, having that, you go all the way back to the great books, you go all the way back to your Western civilization, and you understand why things are done the way they are and what worked in the past and what hasn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that helps us, gives you such a perspective moving forward into the future. Right.
Well, thank you. No, that is very interesting. It's funny, especially coming from a school in which, even today, it's funny when the prospective students come through. I think one of the unique things at Hillsdale is that most professors don't let you even use your laptops in class, so in some sense, it seems Hillsdale is really, kind of in its own age with technology, but, it's definitely how you come to think about it. So thanks for sharing that with us. Bert, I'm curious from your experience, you see so many kids go through WHIP, and you must deal a lot with, helping those kids get jobs or internships for the very least. So tell me, what are some of the qualities that you think are commonly what are some of the qualities that people come to expect from the Hillsdale brand? So what should be?
That's a good question. I would definitely kind of echo what Andy was saying, that it's this idea of not necessarily the expectation of what to think, but how to think. They're definitely coming with the experience that they've had with Hillsdale students. They definitely believe that you're coming from a certain kind of foundation, and I think that's true with our commitment to Western heritage and these kind of values. But more so, we're able to see what an organization's working on, the problems that they're encountering, the different issues or concerns that they are dealing with, and being able to look at things not from just I know that I am, I stand on this policy this way, so I know that I need to do this, but more so, well, okay, where are you coming from with that? How to be able to craft arguments, be able to kind of debate back and forth with people, not necessarily that are on opposite sides of the issue, but even on your own side. So there's definitely that aspect of it. I think there's definitely a sense of Hillsdale students being hardworking, and that they don't necessarily see things below their kind of or beneath them in any way. They expect Hillsdale interns to be able to come into an office meeting, and even though they have this kind of great educational background that may be better, I would argue, than some of their peers, they're not afraid to kind of dive in and do kind of the grunt work. But in that, Hillsdale students I've experienced have been able to separate themselves from kind of the other interns by kind of being the leader of the interns. That's a common experience that I've heard from intern coordinators. Kind of my only thing that I would share as kind of a advice for students who are looking for internships, not only in jobs in DC but other places. Hillsdale students do have this reputation of being maybe sometimes too modest, sometimes too humble when in the office or when dealing with their coworkers. And that comes from the fact that we are all in very hard classes, and a lot of the times we're in that position of being taught lessons instead of necessarily giving the right answers all the time. And so when you come out to DC or any other place for that matter, being able to come into an office and really kind of take charge of whatever role you're in, whether that's, junior intern or, the director of so-and-so, being able to lead an office and being able to step up and ask good questions and make good comments and make observations, I think is something that Hillsdale students should be able to do very easily just with our background. So I would say that that's kind of what the expectation is for intern coordinators, hiring managers, people in all offices out here in DC.
Mm-hmm. And for you, Kristiana, I mean, so obviously Hillsdale is 1,500 students, so we're not an entirely, a very large school, but you've managed to find yourself still kind of within the political sphere. So in that sense, part of within the Hillsdale connection, I guess people do tend to know Hillsdale specifically when it comes to politics. But how have you used the Hillsdale brand to help advance yourself, getting yourself all the way out to Oakland, California?
Well, I think Bert would echo this, and other Hillsdale alumni would echo this, but the Hillsdale name really is known far beyond Michigan. One of the benefits of my job is that I get to talk to a whole bunch of people, and I get to ask them what's important to them, what kind of schools are important to them, what principles are important to them. And what I've heard over and over and over again from donors, large and small, is that Hillsdale is a key consideration of theirs. And it's an instant connection that I'm able to make with them being a Hillsdale grad. And we can connect over the kind of principles that we share, both as far as character, the kind of character that you develop at Hillsdale, doing the hard work over and over and over every day, rising to the challenge that professors provide for you, turning in solid, well-researched work, and really learning the principles. I think people, especially in the conservative and libertarian movements, they really care about the economics, and they really care about the issues that we're discussing. And Hillsdale students have been exposed to those through all of our classes, all of our internship work, all of our real life experience. And that's something that donors, and not just donors, I think just well-meaning people throughout the United States and perhaps even the world recognize in Hillsdale students. And that's something that I think is not unique necessarily to Hillsdale students, but I think we've had a lot of opportunity to practice that. And the more that we get into the workplace, the more internships that we take, the more that we're able to be good people, doing good work, writing well, speaking well, thinking well, I think the brand will naturally kind of continue with the work that we're doing.
Right. And so this is a question I usually like to ask all my guests, but for the sake of time, since we're almost out of time here, I'm going to ask you, Bert, since you do seem to handle a lot of the people who come through WHIP. You mentioned already the thing about modesty and that Hillsdale students sometimes are too modest. This question is kind of similar in that nature. If there is something that you wish you could tell, Hillsdale students who want not necessarily just an internship, but are applying for a job, something that, often maybe they, don't do, but would be very easy for them to do, or, one big tip, what would that be?
Right. I think one big tip that I could give is be engaged beyond just kind of the stereotypical answers or questions that you think you're going to get in an interview. Many times my students will go into interviews, and I've had this experience myself, where, you kind of run through the cliche questions in your mind, right? Why do what makes you qualified for this position? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And those are all good questions that you might get asked by, one person who is going to be maybe your direct supervisor, or somebody who's going to be dealing with you on a daily basis regularly. But a lot of times in these interviews, you're also going to be speaking to people who might be 2-3 levels above you. They might be leaders of big nonprofits or small nonprofits. They're going to be people who you might not interact with a lot, but they're hiring you, and they expect to see value out of you. And so those kind of cliche questions can give you a lot of insight as to, how do I think this person will budget their time during when they're pressed against the deadline. But it doesn't really tell you a lot about who you are as a person. So when I interview people, a lot of my, I ask some of those kind of cookie cutter questions, but I also ask a lot of questions to find out who you are as a person. So I might ask you, what's a book or a podcast that you've been reading or listening to lately that you find really interesting? Tell me about it. Having answers like that prepared, having answers to questions about you as an individual and what your interests are and what your hobbies are, says a lot about kind of how serious you take these things. I think that as we move into more a modern workplace where people are going to be making their own hours, working from different places than just an office, people are going to be much more, and we blur that line between work and your personal life. I think that the questions of who you are as a person, what your values are, what is interesting to you, are going to be questions that make it into an interview. And so I think just having those answers prepared. Now, a lot of those things, your values, your character, that's easy because you're a Hillsdale student. And so you already have a lot of that. You know the honor code.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell the story about how everyone leaves their backpacks outside the cafeteria. No one steals anything. I mean, that's a great card to play. But then also, I've been reading this book lately and this is why, and I find this really fascinating. That tells me that you're very engaged in other things beyond the workplace. And that tells me a lot about who you are as a person. So
Great.
Having those kind of stuff ready for interviews is always a good tip.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for your unique perspectives tonight. I think we got a little bit of taste of everything. For those of you joining us now, feel free to rewind and watch the webinar from the very beginning. We've got great guests tonight. We got Andy, who's an elementary school teacher, specifically in the STEM field. We have Bert, who works outside Washington, D.C. as the program associate for the WIP program. And we have Christine, who's the development manager at the Independent Institute out in Oakland. So I encourage you to listen to the whole thing. And if you have been with us this entire time, we thank you for listening. And once again, thank you all for joining us tonight. Specifically, you three, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. And,
absolutely. And go Chargers.
That's right. Go Chargers. We'll end on that note. So once again, thanks for listening. We encourage you to listen to more Beyond the Bubble episodes on our Facebook videos tab. You can go ahead and look at all the old ones we had from last semester. We got plenty more coming this semester. So make sure you tune in every Monday night at 8 p.m. for the rest of the semester. Thank you and good night.